Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another tutorial session from my living room. um, this week, you would have completed your whatchamacallit quiz one, and now I'm going to recap the preference formation and information search lecture. So let's get into it. Okay, so information search, what is it? Okay, so it's the process of gathering information for the purpose of creating a set of consideration alternatives. What does that mean? Basically, after you realize you have a problem of needing to buy something, naturally you'll start looking for information on how to solve your problem, i.e. where to buy it, what to buy, how to buy, etc. And so your consideration alternatives are all the options that you have in front of you to help you solve the problem. So obviously you're going to engage in information search to do that. And info can come from two different areas. It can come internally from an internal place, or external search. So internal search is I consult myself and basically my memory in order to solve a problem. So an example of this is I need to get some water. Last time I bought Mount Franklin, it was really good. Gonna buy it again. That's an example of me engaging in internal information search. The other option I have is to actually look for external stimuli or external information to help me solve the problem. So, for example, with my water example, and this would usually not happen in real life, but I would say, hey, I'm really thirsty, I need a bottle of water. I turn to my imaginary friend and I say, hey, what water brand do you like? And they say, XYZ water. And then I buy XYZ water. And so that's external search because I asked someone externally, okay, of myself. So external search can also be looking at advertisements, etc. I'll show you in a second. All right, so moving on, where are we up to? Okay, so as I mentioned in the webinars, the quiz 4 is going to be you guys pretty much drawing the consumer behavior model. So I want to kind of roughly show you where information search fits in. This is very rough. This is how the textbook sets it out, and this is how generally most models on the internet will set it out. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true. But for the purpose of you just trying to fit things into a timeline or fit things into a process, like a cyclical process, this is how I see it, okay? So stage 1, problem recognition. I have a problem, I'm thirsty. Stage 2, as you can see here, information search. So I look for info to help me solve my problem. Stage 3, I look at the alternatives that I've decided for myself. So example, and that this will be coming up next in the next lecture. But after I've looked for information, I've come up with brand A and brand B water. How am I going to evaluate these alternatives, and how do consumers decide which one to purchase? Stage 4, I actually purchase the product, and then stage 5, I feel something post-purchase. Do I feel happy? Do I feel sad? Do I feel satisfied? Do I feel angry? Etc. So roughly that is where information search fits in, and hopefully that kind of makes sense, and you can say to yourself, oh, hang on, yeah, that's what I do every time I buy something. That is, this should not sound like a crazy out of the world process because you do this every day. It just, you don't necessarily sit down and think about it in this kind of 5-step process. All right, so let's move on. All right, types of information search. So I said that it can be internal, external. However, there's a couple of different other types that I want to go through, and there is purchase-related info search versus purchase-related versus purchase-related. No, okay, so purchase-related versus ongoing is what I meant to say. So a need to know versus interest. And an example of this is purchase-related means that I know that I need to buy something really soon. So I say to myself, by the end of next week, I have to replace my MacBook. It's really playing up on me. Okay, so the type of information search I'm going to do is directly related to knowing that I'm going to be buying this product soon. However, ongoing search, for example, is I don't have a particular purchase in mind that I need to execute. I just love looking for info. This may sound weird. So an example of this is, for example, if you really love racing cars, you will happily read up on articles, blogs, look at ads, about racing cars because you generally are interested in racing cars. And this is also a type of information search because one day when you do decide to buy a racing car, you'll consult that information that you have sought ongoingly. Does that make sense? Love how I'm just asking myself questions because there's no one to respond to me. But anyway, I just pretend that we're in a classroom. So yes, that is what ongoing search is. So it's interest related, Similarly, you may have an interest in makeup. So you don't necessarily need to buy anything. You just continually look for, articles or information about it. Okay, internal versus external search, we already talked about. And then active versus deliberate, again. So quite sort of similar to this type, but active versus deliberate. Basically, active, usually I know I have a item in mind that I need to buy, i.e. a new phone. I will deliberately and actively go onto the Apple website to look at the new phones available. This is deliberate intention. This is deliberate information search. However, passive is, I'm waiting for my train at town hall, and before the train arrives, I look up and there is a billboard about the new iPhone 11. Okay, so I've incidentally and passively found information about the iPhone. Okay, so how can you see how they're very different? All right, moving on. I can't tell how long I talk here, but anyway, I'll try to keep it moving. Okay, so examples of sources of information. So yes, like I said, many different sources out there, internal, external, passive, etc. So internal, like I said, is usually your memory and past experiences. So again, and we usually do this, especially for cheap purchases. For example, if I need to buy chewing gum or you need to buy chewing gum, you don't go onto a website and research what chewing gum you're going to buy, right? You just consult your memory. Hey, last time I bought extra, flavor was really good, going to buy that again. So you pick that up at the supermarket and buy that again. You don't necessarily register that you're engaging in information search, but you are. So yeah, like I said in my example, you look at your previous experiences for info. And this is a really shortcut way, right? So you can find the info pretty fast because you just engage your memory and there you go. All right, there's also personal sources. So we often ask friends, family, etc. about products, services, things that we buy. Usually of the more expensive category, right? So we don't necessarily ask people for their recommendation on, I don't know, a pen, okay? But however, if it's an expensive product, like a phone or a camera or a laptop, we may ask other people for info. We can also look for or look at independent sources. So that includes the government and the Australian Bureau of Statistics, maybe the ACCC website to again gather information about the purchase I'm about to make. Okay, then we can obviously look at marketing sources, so advertisements, brochures in your mailbox, if anyone gets those anymore, email ads as well. They're all examples of information. And then, finally here, just now probably the biggest source of information, but the internet, so usually, and again for those medium, so those limited decisions, those high risk decisions, example, imagine you're buying a car. I doubt that from the moment you decide I'm going to go buy a car, you're just simply going to walk into a dealership and buy the first car you see. You're going to engage in heaps of information search, probably using the internet first. You're going to probably read up about, all the car specs, any sales that are going on, customer reviews. I mean, the internet is basically, for this generation, one of the largest sources of information. All right, moving on. Okay, so what is the purpose of engaging in information search? Why do we do it? Okay, so basically we want to maximize utility and we want to minimize efforts. And what does that mean? So again, think about a purchase that you've made or an upcoming purchase that you plan to make, reasonably large, like think over $50 or $100. And you as a consumer, you want to know that you're getting the best value for your money. So you're going to maximize your utility. And at the same time, you want to know that you've done this with as minimal effort as possible. So, consumers, we want to get the best deal out there. So we want to make sure that we're getting the best deal. But by the same token, we don't want to spend 4 days and, 55 hours doing this search and wasting our time doing it. So we're kind of really selfish in that sense. We want the best deal, so we want to make the most of our money, and we want to do that really fast. And that's basically what this means. And again, think about yourselves. Like, I'm sure if you have been looking at a new jacket or a new pair of trainers, I'm sure you have done quite a bit of research on Google Shopping, trying to figure out who's got the sales on, who's got the cheapest item, who's got, the best value for money for that particular product that you're looking for. So we all engage in information search. Okay, so then, obviously we try to maximize our benefits and minimize our costs while we're doing information search, okay? And what does this mean? Again, like I said, we want high quality products. Nowadays, we want to know that we're getting the best price on our high value products. When we have done substantial information search, we have greater confidence in our purchase, right? Because, think about something that you've bought and imagine you've spent 3 days, researching on buying your new computer before you bought it. So the moment when you do end up buying it, you're like, hey, this is definitely the best option that I had, and I definitely chose the best thing because I spent 3 days looking for information on it. You know what I mean? So we really have more confidence and lower risk when we do end up doing substantial information search. Okay, and then costs, basically, like I said, we want to minimize these when we're doing information search. Okay, so whether that be transportation costs, physical and psychological effort. What does that mean? Okay, so this is actually a major problem these days. And because of the internet and information search being so easy, we're seeing people and customers experience increasing amounts of frustration and fatigue. So what do I mean about this? The biggest example, who has ever attempted to, pre-COVID days, book a holiday, wherever it may be? And so you've got 10, I'm really guilty of this. I'll have 10 tabs open on my computer, one for the flight, one for the accommodation, one for the car rental, one for, a suitcase website. And so and these are all information searches that I'm engaging in about my purchase of the holiday. And so after a while, we just get so fatigued about the information that, and I do this all the time, I'm like, I can't do this right now. I close the whole window down. And I'm sure we've done this. We've all done it, right? Because I don't know anyone that has one tab open simultaneously these days. And because we've got so many tabs open simultaneously now, we have too much information, leads to information overload, and we do see consumers struggling with the frustration and fatigue related to purchases these days. So I was going to make this the question this week, but I realized maybe too difficult, in the sense that, what can retailers and businesses do to reduce the fatigue that customers experience when they're looking for information? And, very simply, I'll just give you the answer, but it's to try to simplify the process as much as possible. So you'll see all the new gen companies, all the high tech companies, if you jump onto their website, try to purchase something, try to look for information, it's very neatly set out. It's very nicely categorized. It's very user friendly. Okay. And the process from looking for information to purchasing the product is really seamless. It doesn't cause us to be frustrated or fatigued. So all you need to do to see an example of this is have a look at the way the Apple website is organized, like really nicely, streamlined, such that a consumer can look for his or her info without being overwhelmed and execute their purchase, without having this breakdown of being like, oh my God, there's too much info, I can't buy something today. Because that is the last thing that we want to see as a business. All right, so moving on from there. Okay, so after I've looked for information, so back to the process of, let's imagine my example of needing a new computer. I need this new computer. I've looked up a number of different websites. I've looked at the Apple website and I looked at the Samsung website. And so the next thing I do as a consumer is I create an evaluative criteria. Okay, and this is basically in my head, and maybe some people write this down, but you will start to say, from this computer I'm going to buy tomorrow, it's got to be under 1 kilo. It's got to have a 512 RAM. I'm sure that doesn't make sense. And it's got to be pink. Imagine that I said that, okay? That is an example of an evaluative criteria. Every consumer has an evaluative criteria when they want to buy something, okay? So, and everyone's going to be highly probable different. So we'll have this evaluative criteria. Like I said, not many of us write it down, but some people might. And then obviously we will look for the alternatives that help us satisfy the evaluative criteria, okay? So in my computer example, I then say to myself, there's a couple of items, there's a couple of brands and products that do satisfy this evaluative criteria. So we will look into these awareness sets now. So I'll move on to the next slide just to explain these to you. So we'll create this set of preferences for products. And usually when it comes to a certain category of product, all the brands that you are aware of in a category form your awareness set. So if I said, you've got 5 minutes, name me every computer brand that you ever knew existed, that is an example of your awareness set. Now, sorry, let me reverse that. So, yes, so that is all the backtrack. Yes, so awareness, everything that you're aware of. Evoked set, however, is if I say to you, hey, when it comes to laptops, tell me the brands that come to your head first. And you say Samsung, Apple. That is your evoked set. So they're the ones that kind of rise to the top when you first think of that category. Laptops, Samsung, Apple. That's your evoked set. Inert set are the ones that they're still part of your awareness set, but they didn't come to your mind first. So, after a few minutes, I then say to you, hey, what about Alienware laptops? And you say to me, oh yeah, I know of them, but they didn't come to mind. That is an example of a brand that fell in your inert set. And then finally, your consideration set are the brands that you would consider actually buying. Okay, so this is different from the evoked set in the sense that evoked is what comes to mind first, but that doesn't necessarily mean you'd consider buying them. So in my evoked set, for example, of laptops, I would say my evoked set of brands is Samsung, Dell, and Apple. However, I would not consider purchasing Samsung or Dell. Therefore, they're not even in my consideration set. They're simply in my evoke set. In my consideration set, I say I only consider Apple. And a good way to remember this is the consideration set is the set of brands and products that you would actually consider spending money on. Okay, not just remembering for fun because it's a great brand name. Okay. So let's move on from there. Okay, so I've got my preference sets now formed in my brain. I've looked for the information. So let's backtrack. I've looked for the information. I found the preference sets. And now I've narrowed it down to, so let's follow me in my laptop purchasing journey. I've narrowed it down to, in my consideration set, the MacBook Pro 13-inch and the MacBook Air 13-inch. Okay, so let me just write this here because I think it's a good example. Mac Air and Mac Pro. So these are the two Mac Pro. So these are the two products in my consideration set. So obviously now I can only buy one. And these three rules are what helps determine how I'm going to choose between these two options. Okay, so how am I going to choose between these two? So I have to think back to my to a couple of slides back where I said, as consumers, we all have evaluative criterias. And my evaluative criteria was it needs to be under a kilo, it needs to be pink, and it needs to have 512 RAM, remember? So I think back to my evaluative criteria. By the way, that's definitely not the case, but I think back to that. And if I am, let's start off with a non-compensatory consumer or decision maker. So these are all types of decision making, okay? So how am I going to decide? So if I'm non-compensatory, I will take those three evaluative criteria that I just said. Needs to be pink, needs to be 512 RAM, needs to be under a kilo. And I'm going to say, hey, the product that I buy, it has to satisfy all these three criteria perfectly. None of them will compensate for the other. So for example, if I go into the store and the Mac person tells me, hey, this computer is under a kilo, but it doesn't come in pink, it only comes in silver. If I'm a non-compensatory consumer, I will be like, no, thank you. It has to be exactly the three criteria that I just told you. However, if I am consumer type 1, which is a compensatory decision maker, I will say in this scenario, as you've guessed it, yes, sure, I will take that computer that you just offered me. I understand that it's under 1 kilo, it's got the RAM, but you know what? Because it's got such a big RAM, I'm going to let it compensate for the fact that it's not pink. So that's where we get the name compensatory from, okay? And I mean, in very, very simple terms, it's like saying we let, one crappy criteria compensate for one super good criteria. So a compensatory consumer is one that will respond to a salesperson that says, hey, this has got scratches on it, but I'll give you a discounted price. Okay, so you let the discounted price compensate for the fact that it's got scratches on it, versus a non-compensatory person would say, no way in that scenario. Finally, we have the heuristics rule of thumb consumer. They are super simple beings, and they basically just say, I'm going to buy the first computer I see that works or that turns on. Okay, so we rarely see this these days, but for computer type purchases, but for example, with a water purchase, many people just use a rule of thumb. I will be buying the first water that I see that helps me quench my thirst. And that's pretty much every brand of water. Okay, so very, very simple rule of thumb to help them decide. All right, finally, yes, we've made it to the end. Sorry, I've gone so long. You don't need to do this here. This is going to be the comprehension question for this week. It's a multiple choice one. I'll put this on Moodle and you can answer it there. Okay, So see you guys. I'm just about to record the next video, so see you there. Thanks for listening.